So, here's me buying a ticket in outsavvy. We will be discussing outsavvy as an invisible facilitator of queer nightlife in London right now. We will be discussing this in four main areas: the invisible nature of outsavvy, the architecture that outsavvy has built and uses, the physical way that we experience outsavvy told through a very digital kind of physical, which we will get back to, and queer spaces in general and what they mean and how that ties into outsavvy, and we see how they all kind of loop in and out of each other. Infrastructures by nature, very, very big, with this kind of fluidity that I think is worth addressing. So, outsavvy, established in 2015 as an online ticketing platform for events in London, went UK-wide in 2016. What one might do, how one might encounter outsavvy, I suppose, is sort of finding an event online. However, queers might find their events, like Instagram, word of mouth, that sort of thing. You then get your ticket link, buy a ticket, you get a QR code, like these ones here from Brooklyn Reps data for their recent event in the basement, which used outsavvy, a very queer theatre event. And these are the codes that granted people access into this queer space. And all of that then lets you get into a queer space. And access in and out of queer spaces is an extremely important part of queer life. In and Around the Lighthouse is an essay that details lesbian bars in working class 1950s and 60s, I think. That details the kind of semi-public space that a queer space needs to inhabit, which is to say it wants to be public enough and accessible that anyone could get in and out of it, but it also wants to be private in the sense that it's exclusive for queer people, to then promote the safety for queer people under this kind of heteronormative hegemony that white supremacist capitalism really is drilled into us all. And The Trouble with Normal is a book that advocates, I believe, for a separational politic, suggesting that assimilation and this kind of equality that often gets locked onto discussions of queerness is actually not as progressive as queer people having their own spaces to set their own rules. When you think of things like gay marriage, right? That sort of accepts into a heteronormative standard of a way that relationships are established that kind of disregards the queer. And outsavvy, outsavvy is not necessarily an out queer business, but they do seek to promote and do promote quite actively queer functions, particularly drag and cabaret. They raise money for charities, particularly queer charities. Outsavvy does seek to be very impartial. If you take a look at the walk through purchasing a ticket on outsavvy, aside from Instagram's very slow built-in browser, it's quite seamless. And anecdotally, I'm aware of people who have attended events that I know use outsavvy, who then, when I've tried to talk to them about this project, don't know what outsavvy is. The invisibility of outsavvy is part of its success criteria. Another important part of the success of outsavvy is that everyone uses it. They clearly swept in at a time when we've had a lot of pioneers trying to figure out how to build these online ticketing platforms when we all got phones, and then outsavvy came in and said, I'll show you how it's done. And they did, good for them. But Computational Capital, the essay in which the non-neutrality of databases and the systemic bias in which databases are created, really makes us want to investigate this invisible facilitator for us as a way of protecting queer spaces and the protection of queer people. So that's sort of what we're investigating. When you flip through the database, so this right here is a little P5 sketch for using CSV data from In the Basement, Brooklyn Rep event, and in this data, I've noticed that there's actually not too many indicators of individuals as queers or not that really keeps in touch with this whole invisibility thing that they've got going on. But what it does remind you of is that it's a business. Right here, we've got the fees from each ticket sale, essentially how much money outsavvy has made out of these people. So it's cycling through the 200 odd entries and ticket sales from this event. And it is quite low cost. That is something that outsavvy prides themselves on, is being low cost and accessible. And this data right here is something that it offers. A clientele, it offers an existing base of customers, it offers a hub for these people to go for you to then end up getting more sales. And providing this data, and it's got a dashboard. We all love a dashboard. Containing information. So here's the sales revenue by day, the money made by Brooklyn Rep for their event In the Basement, as shown through outsavvy. And yet, in discussion with Charles, who runs Brooklyn Rep, outsavvy did not promote their event kind of at all. I found myself trying to Google outsavvy In the Basement and finding tons of results that had nothing to do with this event titled In the Basement on Google. Who's that a failing of? Is that Charles for not doing their due diligence and getting their event high up enough in Google searches? Or is it outsavvy's impartiality? Or is it outsavvy as a business? Outsavvy will, end up promoting something like Riposte, where you can have thousands and thousands of people sales and get those small fees, getting outsavvy a lot of money. But these smaller grassroots authentic queer spaces, not getting promoted so much. This is where we get into the discussion of invisibility and this neutrality that outsavvy seems to maintain, and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And holding a complex, multifaceted worldview is a lot harder than a very simplified one, obviously. But I think it's more of a good thing than it is a bad thing. Because yes, it's not exactly standing with queers and saying, I am a queer business and I am with you. At a time where in the UK, and indeed in the world, I think it's really important to be out and proud and in support of queerness, because queers, particularly trans people, are in the face of so much discrimination. But outsavvy doesn't. And what I think they're doing is that they are not promoting themselves as a queer business to then enable them to take money off of people who would be immediately put off from using a queer business. And they are then using that money, as well as the money from queers, to then reinvest in queer spaces and promote drag and cabaret. Unfortunately, the nature of capitalism means that they do have to promote larger events. And from a look through their data, they don't seem to have particularly nefarious goals. They could so easily have email, first name, address. Are they a faggot or not? They don't do that. And I think when you look at other ticketing platforms, sort of like Ticketmaster and all the bullshit they've got going on at the moment, outsavvy seems to be a pretty great home for us queers for now. Going forward, I'm inviting the question of what would an actively queer ticketing platform look like. and it's hard to say until we put capitalism in the bin, but it might look something quite similar to outsavvy.